Hello, and welcome to the Feeling Good podcast, where you can learn powerful techniques to change the way you feel. I am your host, Dr. Rhonda Borowski, and joining me here in the Murrieta studio is Dr. David Burns. Dr. Burns is a pioneer in the development of cognitive behavioral therapy and the creator of the new TEAM-CBT. He is the author of Feeling Good, which has sold over 5 million copies in the United States and has been translated into over 30 languages. His latest book, Feeling Great, contains powerful new techniques that make rapid recovery possible for many people struggling with depression and anxiety. Dr. Burns is currently an emeritus adjunct professor of clinical psychiatry at Stanford University School of Medicine.
Hello, Rhonda. That's my wackiest ever.
Yeah. Hello, David, and welcome to our listeners around the country and across the world, or across the country and around the world, to episode 319 of the Feeling Good podcast. This is another Ask David episode, and we have our marvelous guest host, Matt May, joining us for our Ask David episode. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Rhonda. Hi, David. It's so great to be back with you both.
I want to pronounce that word marvelous that you used. Can
okay.
I?
Yes.
Marvelous.
Marvelous. Yeah. We're so lucky that Matt's name begins with the M.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to read a endorsement from our last Ask David, which was episode 314, which was about what's wrong with me, I can't get laid, health, anxiety, and more. And Brittany wrote into us and said, I just listened to episode 314, and I think this may have been my favorite Ask David episode yet. I like that you guys covered new topics and really took a long time answering each question. I even appreciated the debating as well. I would love to hear more about the hypnosis work you've done. That was so interesting. I didn't realize that you used hypnosis in your therapy. Do you think it's something other therapists hesitate to learn since it could be used for evil?
That's cool. Yeah.
Good.
I think they specifically learn it because it can be used for evil.
Yeah.
And, I wonder what Jeff Lazarus would say, because the podcast we put out, 315, was all about the incorporation of hypnosis within team therapy.
Right. And there's no greater hypnotist or no greater hypnotic subject than the marvelous Matt May.
That's very much true, David. When I was training with Jose Maldonado at Stanford, he trained me how to do hypnosis, and he said that I was always drifting in and out of trances. And probably the most highly suggestible person he'd ever met.
Yeah,
really?
That's right. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah. It's cool. But yes, we can address that. And then we got two other questions. One about, when love dies, what can you do? And then there's another one about cheerleading versus true empathy. So which one do you wonderful people want to tackle first? I know we could just do a little quick stuff on hypnosis, Matt, because you have so many neat hypnosis stories, and I have one from my childhood too.
Oh, I'd love to hear your story from your childhood, David.
Well, I'm not sure they're terribly dramatic, but when I used to love magic, and once I was walking past a magic store, and I found them so fascinating. There were two books in the front window. One is, Miraculous Hindu Feats Anyone Can Do, and that was 25 cents. And the other book was called 25 Ways to Hypnotize Your Friends, and that also cost 25 cents.
That's a dilemma.
I bought both of those books. I was just fascinated, and the Miraculous Hindu Feats thing. It was kind of a disappointment because it said you'll learn how to push needles through your body and put your fingers into molten hot lead. And the secrets of them were you just do it. like the molten hot lead one says, just make sure you get real dry, your hands, like sawdust and stuff. And then then just push them in steadily and pull them out steadily, and you won't be burned. And
did you try that?
No, well, I didn't know where to find molten hot lead in the first place, but it didn't sound very appealing. And then sticking needles through your body, it says just pull your skin up and push a big, needle through them. They said that's all they do, and you'll kind of get used to it. I never tried that one either, so I gave up on that book. Although I must say it was fascinating.
I wonder how many lawsuits they got.
Huh? I don't think any in those days. No. This was probably the late 1950s, or I'm sure. Yeah. Oh yeah, it was. Then I was like probably a high school freshman or something like that. But then the one, how to hypnotize your friends, that was really fascinating. And it just said you put a needle there, not a needle, but a candle, and you light it, and then you tell them to stare at the flame and just say to them, you're going deeper and deeper, and so say it in kind of a deep, serious voice. And so your eyes are getting heavy. You won't be able to open them, just standard kind of stuff. Try. Your eyes are getting very sticky. Try. Now, in fact, if you're listening to this show, you can try it now. Notice your eyes are getting sticky. You won't be able to open them. Try. Notice you can't get your eyes open. And then if that works, then you tell them other things and bring them into deeper and deeper trances. And I thought it was fascinating. And I started just trying it with my friends, and it worked on many of them. And it showed you how to do a suggestibility test, like based on, get behind them, put your hands beside their ears. Say you're falling backwards. You can't stop falling backwards. Then you slowly move your hands backwards. And then if they suddenly fall backwards, they're hypnotizable. And lo and behold, that worked too. And so we just had a riot with it. I mean, I hypnotized kids all over the place, and everybody just loved it. It was so fascinating. But I mean, we did kind of do things that in retrospect, you think we could say were kind of evil, maybe, but they were sure fun. Like, this one guy I hypnotized, and we told him that after he woke up from the hypnotic trance, every time he heard the word, I think, basketball or something like that, he'd shout out beep real loud. But he wouldn't know he was doing this. And his subconscious mind would count how many times he heard this word basketball or whatever word we were using, and then he'd say beep that many times. So we went to order a Dairy Queen, and we went one by one. I'd like this kind of thing. It was just about 6 blocks from our house, and, some kind of a snow cone or something. And then when he got up and she said to him, what would you like? And he started to speak, we would say like basketball. And then he'd shout out, beep, beep. And he didn't realize he did it. And she said, what was it you're ordering? And as he'd start to speak, then we'd, like 3 or 4 or 5 of us, we'd say basketball. And he'd go beep, 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 beep the exact number of times. And it seemed incredibly funny at the time. But I know you did a neat one with a fly in one of the psychiatric residents' noses.
Did I?
Yeah, do you remember?
I may have. I did a lot of fun things with hypnosis. I'm not so sure about the potential for evil that it has. I think there are a number of misconceptions around hypnosis. I'm a believer that all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, and that if you're given a suggestion that you don't want to follow, I've seen this over and over again, that people simply just won't follow it. And there was a case of some bank robbers, I think in Switzerland, who claimed that they weren't guilty because they'd been hypnotized to rob the bank. And
a lot of people do that. Even around here, a lot of people break into houses and stuff because people hypnotize them.
I think there may have been other motives. So it was thrown out of court. Their defense was not accepted because again, if you're taking the suggestion, there's some part of you that wants to go along with it.
Yeah.
The stage hypnosis is often, it seems as if the hypnotist is controlling people's behavior and actions. But what he's actually a master, he or she is actually a master of, is identifying people who want to go along with it. And
get up on stage and have some fun.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting. I used to do a lot of hypnosis for things like smoking cessation, and had a lot of good luck with that. Single session treatments for smoking cessation. I
did too.
You did as well.
Yeah, for smoking. Yeah.
I think I remember your approach to it, which I really liked, where it was questions that were like agenda setting.
Right.
Would you be willing?
And think of all the benefits if you became a non-smoker. That's how I became a non-smoker. I'd only smoked for a year, but then someone came and hypnotized our psychiatric residency group at Highland Hospital, where I was at the time, and then explained about hypnosis and gave us those suggestions. And, said, it wasn't trying to make us change a habit, but if you have some habit, would think about what it would be like to be a non-smoker, and you'll have clean lungs and better energy and blah, blah, blah. And, had us wiggling our fingers if we were ready to do it now, or we'd rather do it later, and various things like that. And I wiggled the finger, and after that, I never smoked another cigarette. I never missed it or anything. I thought, well, there's some value there.
There is one reason not to do hypnosis for some people, which is a little, maybe, did we cover this in the last session on hypnosis? The contraindication is if there's some legal trial.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Tell us about that.
So if you've been hypnotized, it will affect not the accuracy of your memories, but your certainty about those memories. And so testimony won't be accepted because people who've been hypnotized to remember something remember it far more vividly and are more persuasive, even though they're not more accurate.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So if they've been hypnotized, they remember it more vividly, but not more accurately.
That's right. And so if someone has a potential legal case in front of them, I would ask them to be videotaped first to give their testimony prior to engaging in hypnosis, so that they don't miss their opportunity to testify.
Oh, cool. Before we go on to another topic, and if people want more in hypnosis, I guess we can give them a lot more stories. Is there anything, I know you and I, we talked about hypnotizing that young woman who had somatic complaints, and I think Jose Maldonado may have said, or maybe it's something I thought of, but all anxiety is a form of self-hypnosis, because you're giving yourself suggestions like I'm about to go crazy, or I'm about to die, if you're having panic attacks, for example, or I just know that I'm going to blow it when I get in front of the audience. I'm going to look nervous, and, I'm going to freak out, and, I'll stutter and get defensive, and people will look down on me. And you tell yourself those things and believe them, and then they happen. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I thought that was interesting to think that all states of anxiety are states of self-hypnosis. You're in a trance that you put yourself in, but you don't realize that you've done that. And so I think anxiety-prone people might be more highly hypnotizable than perhaps other people on average. But also, I've come recently to see depression as also a state of self-hypnosis, because you're kind of in a trance where everything seems very, very negative, and you're giving yourself these negative messages that are distorted, but you believe them absolutely. And anger, too, is another kind of hypnotic trance where you're telling yourself, you go into a trance, you say, oh, these Trump supporters are jerks, or oh, these lefty liberals are horrible human beings, and you develop anger, and you see other people as objects, and you have these imaginations about other people, which don't map onto reality, but you believe that they're real. I don't know if you've had that same idea, Matt, about
definitely.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's harder for us to defend against our own internal suggestions, the things that we're telling ourselves. It's harder to simultaneously be aware that, oh, I'm telling myself this thing, as opposed to if someone else is trying to hypnotize you, it's, you can kind of fact check and say, well, is that true or not? And it may be part of the reason the methods like externalization of voices is so effective, is that you can hear what the hypnotic suggestions coming from the outside, and you have more of your mind available to see through them and see how they're not true.
Very, very interesting.
Very interesting.
Last thing, I got away from hypnosis for a number of reasons. But one of them was that for most things, it just wasn't very effective. And then I was learning cognitive therapy. And since then, I've learned team therapy and just found them so dramatically more powerful and effective that I just never got back to hypnosis. But I've never been against it. And I think it's one of the tools. We have over 100 tools for helping people change the way they think and feel. Can you think of anything other than smoking that you would still think it's, especially helpful for? It could potentially be helpful for anything, of course.
I mean, there are a number of different things. So there's certain like medical uses for hypnosis. There was a Scottish surgeon back in the 1800s who would do surgeries with no anesthesia, just hypnosis. And he had much better outcomes than people who were using anesthesia at that time. Dentists would commonly practice hypnosis to help their patients, go through a procedure without experiencing the pain from that procedure.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it can be extremely powerful as a tool. So there's also conversion disorder is a type of self-hypnosis that hypnosis itself can be used to treat effectively.
And tell people what conversion disorder is, because those are big words and all of our audience wouldn't necessarily know.
Conversion disorder is where a psychological problem is converted into a physical one. And so it maps on nicely to the hidden emotion model that you've described, David, that something is bothering this person psychologically and they experience it physically. Like a classic case was a fellow who was driving in the snow, and there's a person in the crosswalk and he slammed on his brakes and the car just kept on going and hit that person. And when he woke up in the hospital, he had hit his head against the steering wheel, and they told him that, well, he asked, is the pedestrian all right? And when they told him, no, the pedestrian died, he lost his vision. And they rushed him back to get another CAT scan because they thought maybe he'd hit his head harder than we thought. But there was nothing wrong with his brain. But there was a hidden emotion. There was a reason why he had lost his vision. And this is one of Jose Maldonado, brilliant psychiatrist at Stanford, treated this fellow, and he discovered that the reason why he'd lost his vision. Do you either of you have a guess?
Well, he'd never be able to drive again.
Yeah, he could never,
because he didn't want to buy glasses anymore.
That's a good guess. No, it was exactly, Rhonda, you're right. He didn't want to run the risk of killing anyone ever again. And so when that was discovered, they gave him the opportunity to find some other solution to that problem. And he decided that time, I'll just voluntarily give up my license. And his vision returned, and he was able to go about his life.
It is so cool.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, if you folks have any more questions about kind of cool topics like hypnosis, we can probably come up with a lot of really fun and interesting stories, both of our kind of zany uses of hypnosis when we were kids, which I still think was incredibly fun, like some of the funnest things in my life. But then I gave it up in high school because I think my junior year, one of my teachers said, you shouldn't be doing hypnosis. That's kind of a bad, dangerous thing to do. And I got scared, and I never did it again until I was a psychiatrist. But it was just so much fun. And I guess we all have, this loony side of our personality, and it's like an adventure. Life becomes suddenly magical and amazing, because you're only limited by your imagination when you're working with someone with hypnosis. In fact, when I was a senior at high school, I got the science award because for my physics project, I made a machine to hypnotize people, and it worked really, really well. It is kind of like the prototype of the app we have now, which also works pretty well. So it's just really fun stuff. I guess we get old, we get so serious, but we still love the magical side of life.
Well, I just want to remind listeners also that episode 315 is all about hypnosis with Jeff Lazarus, who uses hypnosis with a lot of different medical conditions, with children and adults. GI problems and tics and Tourette syndrome and other
school phobia,
all
kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But he's found that by blending it with paradoxical agenda setting or, TEAM-CBT, it becomes vastly more powerful. And you, Matt, were the first person that made me aware. And I didn't understand when you first said it, that even when you're doing hypnosis, you have to get at the person's motivation, melt away their resistance, find out, what their resistance and motivation is because that's a hugely important, any kind of therapy that you do, including hypnosis. And you're absolutely right about that. And it was kind of a shock to my system. I was glad you said you learned it from me, but I actually learned that from you.
Well, maybe we can both take credit.
Yeah.
Well, shall we move on to our next question?
Yep.
So I was talking to David, Matt, about a situation where I had a really negative experience, and he was so thoughtful and kind in his response, and I felt really better, and I've gotten over it. But I was telling him afterward that I had two people responded in two very distinct and different ways. There were some people who did what we call cheerleading and said, "Oh, you'll be okay. You have a great life. Don't worry about it. You'll get over it," which I found really annoying and just really annoying. And it actually made me even more irritable than I was by the situation that I was talking about. And then there were other people who were, mostly team therapists, who gave me really great empathy and just said, "Wow, I'm sorry you went through that. Tell me more. Do you want to talk about it some more?" What was that? Where I felt really, supported and kind of loved, And I was talking to David about discussing the difference between cheerleading and true empathy on an Ask David method. So I want to, pose it to you guys. What do you see as the difference between cheerleading and true empathy? And maybe that's something that we could talk about.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, and then I'll shut up, but that, in empathy, you're not trying to cheer the other person up, which is really a self-centered thing that people do. And when you're trying to cheer someone up, it's like giving them the message that you're wrong to feel upset. And I'm not interested in hearing about your negative feelings. So it's really kind of a put down. And therapists would swear that they don't do this, but I have seen many therapists, maybe the majority, who cannot resist this urge to cheerlead and to try to cheer people up. And I would say it's virtually never effective. And I have my own story about it, which is when my cat Obi died, or I presume he died. He disappeared one night and was probably killed, and sadly in the forest behind our house. There's predators there. We have a bobcat now, spends half its time in our yard. Wow. And so there's danger lurks. But I was so sad because Obi was really my best friend, and he taught me so much. And he came to us feral, and he was terrified of us, but he was half dead, and he forced himself to our back door. And over a period of weeks and months, we developed trust, and he became our indoor cat. And I loved him more than life itself. And I was just heartbroken when he died, and I still talk to him, as well as Marilyn Coffey. Every time I jog, I talk to both of them a little bit, and I tell them I hope they're okay, and tell them I love them. And it's just a nonsensical, superstitious thing, but it means something to me. But I do remember that when Obi died, I was talking about it in the Tuesday group and all the grief that I was feeling. And then there was a woman in the group at the time who was a bit on the controlling side. I don't mean to be overly critical of her, because I have faults probably way worse than hers, but she is always trying to control people and tell people what to do, and it's irritating. And she said, "Oh, don't be upset. You can adopt another cat. And you'll get over this." And I got really angry, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but I said I really, something to the effect, "I really resent what you're doing right now. Please cut it out and stop trying to take my grief away from me. I want to feel this feeling, because this is my connection to Obi, who I still love and will love forever. And I'll grieve his loss for the rest of my life. And that's something I want to do." But people just don't realize how really aggressive and to my way of thinking, mean-spirited, although it's a form of microaggression, but people think they're being nice and trying to cheer you up. What's your take on it, Matt?
Yeah, as I'm listening to both of you, I'm thinking, gosh, I've probably been guilty of this a number of times in my life, cheerleading or trying to cheer people up. But I agree wholeheartedly with what you're both saying, that it is a failure in terms of empathy. And I am kind of curious why that happens. I wonder if part of it is a fear. Like you said, the woman in the group, you experienced her as controlling. And I wonder if people are just afraid to go into the depths of suffering with someone else and allow them to feel those feelings. It may be a form of emotophobia.
Yeah, right.
Like I got to rescue you from your feelings, as opposed to I want to be with you you and your feelings.
Yeah, it's this idea that we're supposed to be happy all the time, and it's just an annoying concept, because it's great to be happy, but without genuine feelings of sadness and loss and despair, there's a lot of horror and awfulness in the world, and unless you're acknowledging the dark side, you can't really appreciate the light side. We're going to post our chart that we made, cheerleading versus empathy, with the show notes, and so you'll be able to contrast the two. But in addition to that, maybe we can just remind people that how to do empathy, because I've been trying to teach it to someone who's been emailing me, who appears not to understand the things that I say to him and or how I feel. And it's been devilishly difficult, I would say pretty much impossible to get him to try to empathize with what I'm saying. And it's really creates anger and loneliness. But the do's of it are, a low-level empathy would just be thought empathy and feeling empathy and I'll put the the 5 secrets of effective communication in the show notes too, but it's just to repeat the other person's words and acknowledge their feelings based on those words. And I call that the nothing technique, because you're giving the person nothing. You're just reflecting back to them in a kindly way what they just said to you. And although you're giving them nothing, you're giving them everything, because that's what they want, is someone to understand. You know, if someone says, "Oh, I'm really pissed off because so-and-so screwed me over," or something, you would say, "Gosh, it's that's happened to me at times too." And you say that someone you loved and trusted screwed you over, and I kind of just can't imagine how angry and hurt and betrayed you might be feeling. Can you tell me more about what happened and how you're feeling? That would be thought empathy and feeling empathy plus inquiry, 3 of the 5 secrets. Disarming would be deeper, much deeper form of empathy. When you disarm the person, you see the truth in what they're saying, even if what they're saying seems illogical or exaggerated. You see, you agree with them because you see something on a deeper level, and then I feel statements is sharing your feelings without trying to cheer the person up. Just say, I feel so sad about what you're saying, because as you know, I really care for you and I have so much respect for you, and that's why I'm really hurting right now too. And that's an I feel statement and stroking, and those are the things to do. And then when if you look at the list on the show notes of cheerleading versus empathy, you'll see the sharp and striking and kind of annoying contrasts between the two. But if people don't want to learn empathy, what we're saying now will fall on deaf ears. It's kind of an agenda setting issue. It's, you know, like some people have the agenda of being better than other people, being superior to other people, and being an expert and telling other people what to do. It might be their children, for example. When their children are upset, they might compulsively be giving advice to their children and doing things that just piss their children off, and yet they foolishly think they're somehow being a good parent or something like that.
I love what you're saying, David. I'm just feel like I'm at the feet of the master right now, learning from you. And I also wanted to say how touched I was by the story of, it was Obi, and how you imagine he was probably out there and attacked by a wild animal.
Yeah, and an awful death.
Yeah, and I'm really liking your superstitious side that still has conversations with him and with Marilyn Coffey.
Yeah.
Really like that about you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. And that was just a beautiful example of empathy without any cheerleading, and that's gives me a sense of peacefulness.
Mm-hmm.
Really glad to be with you, David.
Mm-hmm. Me too. I think I was in the Tuesday group when you talked about Obi.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember that conversation very well.
Yeah.
And even though Obi wasn't my cat, I felt so sad along with you to think of, oh my gosh, who knows what happened to him, and how scary it was to think of that. And listening to someone give you that kind of feedback was annoying to me and irritating, and surprising.
It's insulting, really.
Yeah, insulting.
Yeah. And just a little bit more on the sad side. I remember we have this bobcat in our yard. I've been putting water out in the backyard for animals because, you know, we haven't had any rain, and we also have a little fountain in front, and we see squirrels, and we have rabbits living in our yard, and they come and cautiously drink out of just a pail of water I put in the back, and I refresh it every couple of days. And I think the animals appreciate it. But the bobcat came about a week ago, and I saw him drinking, and then he'd put his head up and look around, make sure no one was, you know, going to try to hurt him, and then he'd keep drinking. And I've always been fascinated by bobcats, and it just made me so sad because he looked pretty scrawny. I thought, oh gosh, he's probably having a hard time just like Obi was. And I mentioned to Melanie, but maybe we should just start putting food out for him, like what we did for Obi. And then she talked me out of it. And, for good reason, because then he'd get addicted to coming into our yard and to hunt for the rabbits and to eat that food. And then it wouldn't be safe to go out in the backyard with our sweetie pie because she might be killed by him. So it was hard, but I felt that same love. And I thought, oh gosh, if we didn't have a cat, I could try to befriend a bobcat. And because I've gone out and talked to him when he was in the backyard. And he didn't seem afraid of me, like he was walking along our path. And when I'd talk to him, he'd stop and look at me in a kind of pleasant way. And he'd go walking along, and then I'd talk to him again, and he'd stop and look at me. And I don't know if you can befriend an adult bobcat. I know if you get them as babies, you can turn them into pets. But I really, really wanted to do that. I felt so sad. And I feel sad for the deer, too, who look a little on the thin side. And we put apples out from our apple tree. And we don't eat too many of the apples from our apple trees because we want them all, as many as possible for the deer. And they really, really appreciate it when we throw them out, maybe 25 at a time. And then a day later, they're suddenly gone. And but anyway, I'm just babbling.
In my experience, I love, the way you describe, two things. The way you describe your relationship to animals, that you would want to befriend and feed a skinny bobcat, is so touching.
Yeah.
And, the amount of empathy you have for every sentient being is amazing.
Yeah, but I can be a pain in the ass a lot of times too.
Yeah,
I can be so insensitive.
That is true. Everybody has both. Everybody has everything, right? Hopefully,
that's right. Yeah,
everyone. You can be a pain in the ass, but you can also be this amazing, empathic human.
Yeah,
who has a lot of love in his heart for everyone and animals.
Well, empathy can be learned for those of you who are motivated to learn.
I'm sort of cheerleading you right now.
Yeah.
In my experience, I had, when I was explaining my experience to my friend, that was my experience that was so harmful to me. And she was cheerleading me and trying to tell me, oh, you'll get over it. Oh, it's not that big a deal. Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Don't suffer. I actually had to stop talking to her for about a week because it was too much and it exaggerated the pain.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
It's like anti-empathy.
Yeah, it was anti-empathy.
And very, very angering too.
Yeah. Well, should we go on to our final cool question that Matt has an amazing answer for us?
Yes, our final question is something that someone wrote into us and asked, is it possible to fall out of love? What do you think, Matt?
Do you want to read her comment?
I don't have the whole comment.
Oh, you don't have her email? Mm-hmm. Well, I think she had said something like sometimes she falls out of love with her husband and then they kind of work on it and then she falls back into love. It was something of that nature. Maybe you saw it. I thought I forwarded it to both of you, but maybe not. But that was Brittany again, and it was really a sweet email.
You probably did forward it to me, and I can't find it.
Yeah, could be.
That's great to hear from Brittany again. I like the question.
She's a really neat person. She was on a podcast, once about a year or so ago, because she was having trouble with jealousy, and she was so vulnerable and open and overcame it. And she taught us a lot.
Yeah. Well, one thought I'm having is that so maybe the simple answer to her question is, I think, we can, just like we can drift in and out of enlightenment, we can drift in and out of different feeling states, like being in love. I think that's a particularly complicated and probably different for everyone experience. And I think oftentimes it's therapeutic to fall out of love. That I actually treated a lot of Stanford students, and that was one of their main sources of suffering, is that they would be in love and telling themselves that they need this other person. They couldn't be happy without this other person. In the case of falling out of love, I think sometimes we have this idea too, that sort of like a positive fortune telling, that I'll always love this person, and that love will never go away, not even for a moment. And I think that's a bit of a setup for disappointment later down the line. And rather than thinking we're always supposed to feel something, just to allow ourselves to have whatever feelings are coming up. And maybe the problem isn't so much falling out of love, but telling yourself that you shouldn't fall out of love, or you're not allowed ever to fall out of love. That would be maybe my first round of responses to Brittany.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to get your reactions to that.
I think that's fantastic what you just said. I've also felt in my clinical practice, since I work with so many single people, 60% of the people in my clinical practice in Philadelphia were not involved in it with a partner for a variety of reasons. And I love that problem too, as a matter of fact, and helping people resolve that. But one thing, I think that romantic love is pretty overvalued in our society. And if you can really fall in that romantic love with somebody and be experiencing that and make that work, that's terrific. But the people I saw, that never worked. I never saw anyone who was pursuing romantic love that ever had a good outcome. And I think that, in any close relationship, in India, the parents find a partner and they make it work. And a lot of those marriages are some of the most successful and gratifying. The thing is that in any relationship, I mean, we can be kind of in love or in enlightenment with our work friends, our colleagues, our friends. But I find that in most close relationships that you get pissed off at people, and you get hurt, and you get angry, and when you're feeling like that, you shouldn't be feeling in love or happy or joyous, because that's not where you're at. And if you accept that and then use the 5 secrets, if you want to repair that relationship, I have found that my most gratifying relationships are often with people that I've fought with and then gotten close to, which sometimes requires eating humble pie and seeing that you're screwing up, or the other person has to eat some humble pie. But then you get on a deeper and more loving level. But that's not like romantic excitement or something. That's like a deeper love and respect for the other person. I'll shut up because I'm babbling.
No, I think you're.
Rhonda have important things to say.
Well, you're making a really important point. And I love too what you said, Matt, that people think when they get married that they are never going to have a moment in their relationship when they will not feel in love with the person. And so maybe the first fight or the first time they're so angry that they don't feel love for the person, they flip out and they get confused and
feel ashamed and guilty.
Right.
I shouldn't be feeling this, and then hide their feelings, and it becomes a bigger problem.
Right.
Yeah. And people think that love and anger are opposites, and it's very simplistic, and yet it's widespread. People who are taught if you really love someone, you won't ever be fighting with them or angry with them. And if you're angry or fighting with someone, it means you don't love them. Mm-hmm. And that's just such nonsensical talk, as if things are all one way or all the other way. You can love someone and care about them, but be really pissed off at them at the same time, and wanting to kind of strangle them and hug them at the same time, really.
Mm-hmm. And then what you had talked about before, David, that when you feel so angry that you want to strangle someone and you work it through with them and share yourself and share your feelings and listen to the other person sharing their feelings, then you can develop an even closer, more intimate relationship.
Right.
Seems like we could make another table, sort of healthy love versus unhealthy love.
Yes, if you guys make the table, I'll put it in the show notes.
Okay,
I don't know how to do it, but it sounds
Yeah.
very cool. And let's see, I had one other thing to say, but I can't remember what it was, so I won't say it.
David, you said that you almost never saw people who were pursuing a romantic type of love succeed at that. And I wondered, what are your theories on why that is?
Well, people come to me by definition, if you're a depression psychiatrist, when they're depressed or when life isn't working for them. So the people who found romantic love and made it work never came to me. That's a partial explanation. But I saw a lot of guys, like I remember this salesman guy, he drove around in a sports car, and I think he was doing well with his career, and he was real kind of handsome, and so he, getting laid all the time, which I'm not supposed to say, and so I didn't say that, but that's what was going on. And he was trying to find someone who he'd be wildly in love with and have sex at the 100% wild, gratifying level every time. And his life was just constant disappointments because, he would lose that infatuation for someone, or the sex wouldn't be good enough. And he was just frustrated and unhappy all the time. And it had a great outcome, the treatment. I don't remember the details of it, but I think when he finally started working on communication, learning the 5 secrets of effective communication and how to develop a deep relationship, a meaningful relationship with someone, things suddenly began to pick up for him, and he kind of found something that he'd been looking for, or didn't know that he wanted, but he found something far more rewarding than, trying to find some perfect babe to get laid and have this exciting fantasy of romantic intoxication. And it just was a kind of an unrealistic expectation, at least for most of us. And the older I get, the more grateful I get for, the people that I know, my family, and my son, my daughter, and Rhonda and Matt, and life becomes pretty amazing in quite different ways. And so I'll shut up again as I'm babbling.
Well, I did find Brittany's email, and it's completely related to everything that we're talking about. I think maybe it might be helpful to read it.
Read it. It was beautiful. I thought. She
said, I often hear people say they got divorced or ended their relationship because they fell out of love or grew apart. Do you think there is such a thing as falling out of love, or is it just a decision that someone makes not to work on their relationship anymore, and they decide to distance themselves emotionally?
Yeah, I think it's a decision people make, but I'm also not saying that it's a bad decision. Mm-hmm. When you're young, you may be going out with somebody and kind of really excited about them for a period of time. There was someone I was kind of thought I was in love with, and when I was a freshman in medical school, and then there were some problems there, and it suddenly looked very different from the way I had thought it was. Mm-hmm. And eventually we broke up, and I decided this actually isn't for me, and it was painful at the time, but it was really a good decision. So I don't think you should ever feel like you have to resolve every conflict with every human being, or be in love with every human being. And I think there are decisions to make. And sometimes those decisions are not necessarily rational. Like, I never cared for cherry pie when I was growing up, but I always loved blueberry pie. And, I don't think you can work on learning to like cherry pie. You're going to like what you like. And so you may just, make decisions based on your subjective preferences. So it's not all, 5 secrets and solving every problem and resolving every conflict. I think finding someone who you're attracted to and who you're compatible with and who you like and admire, that'll be, subjective and different for all of us. And I think it's totally appropriate to have a lot of relationships that don't end up in marriage while you're on that journey to find someone.
I love what you're saying there, David. I had two other thoughts just kind of go through my mind. One was how when there's a kind of a romantic love, it's often the sense that we're putting the other person up on a pedestal.
Yeah.
And we're telling ourselves we need them. And I think that causes the other person to reject us.
Yeah.
Because we want to be loved the way we are, flaws and all.
Yeah.
And to be, and we want, I think ideally, in a loving relationship, we're not focused on our needs as much as what can I give to the other person.
Yeah.
And
right.
both people are generously giving to the other person because they enjoy doing that, not because they think they need the other person.
Yeah.
Because they really appreciate that other person, and it brings them joy to give. Then I think you've got a sustainable type of loving relationship.
Yeah. Boy, we sound like old farts, don't we?
Yeah, we are.
No, I don't know.
School teachers or something.
Yeah. No, you just described a very in-depth, very in-depth way, like a very deep, an avenue for very deep love.
Yeah.
I know. Isn't that what we all want?
Oh, thank you, Rhonda.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's awesome.
Well, that's about it for today. How did we do, folks?
I think they'll email us.
Well, but I'm asking you guys.
Oh, us folks.
I really enjoyed spending time with both of you, and always learn a lot anytime I'm hanging out with you both. And I just feel really grateful for the time together.
Me too.
That's how I feel. I thought we did good today, but you folks will tell us. Oh, I had an announcement that I never made at the beginning of the show. That we just surpassed our 6 millionth download.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
So that was kind of cool. And we're still doing about 160,000 downloads a month. And I decided, to take a page out of the book of these motivational speakers and say, maybe we need a goal for next year for our podcast. And because I don't set goals for myself. I've never done that type of thing. And so I thought we could set a goal to see if we could next year work our way up to 250,000 podcasts downloads a month.
All right.
And I don't know if we'll succeed or fail, but I thought, well, there's our goal. I'm not afraid of failing, by the way. But it might be fun to see if we could do that. And if so, we'd need help from all of you. And there's two ways you can give us some help. One would be if you have your own emailing list from your synagogue group or your temple group or your church group or whatever your whatever, or your workers, and you want to tell people about the Feeling Good podcast, because if someone is feeling depressed or anxious or has a relationship problem or habit or addiction, they'll probably get some benefit from the podcast, and to help us grow our audience that way. And also something I've always forgotten to say that Fabrice used to say was to write a review, give us a 5-star or whatever review wherever you get your podcasts, and say some nice things, because somebody told me that's the way you can grow your audience, is get all your listeners to write positive reviews for you. So we'll kind of nudge you folks in that direction a little bit if you're so inclined. We really appreciate it. We take no advertising and so forth. So you folks are our only marketing tool. So if you like what we're doing, and we certainly like having you, and we love what we're doing, and we think it's a gift to have this chance to talk to you every week and share our views on things. Help us to become a part of our team and see if you can spread the gospel according to Saint Rhonda, Saint Matthew, and Guru David.
Gosh, that's the first time anyone's called me a saint.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Matt.
That's also a first for me.
Well, I just pinch myself to remind myself that I'm not living a dream, because it's just such a dream to be with the two of you and be on this podcast. Thank you.
It is.
Right back at you.
Yeah. Yep, right back at you. Absolutely. Well, good night. Goodbye, everybody, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, too.
Wonderful week.
This has been another episode of the Feeling Good podcast. For more information, visit Dr. Burns' website at feelinggood.com, where you will find the show notes under the podcast page. You will also find archives of previous episodes and many resources for therapists and non-therapists. We welcome your comments and questions. If you want to support the show, please share the podcast with people who might benefit from it. You could also go to iTunes and leave a 5-star rating. I am your host, Rhonda Borowski, the director of the Feeling Great Therapy Center. We hope you enjoyed this episode. I invite you to join us next time for another episode of the Feeling Good podcast.